So, Jason, we have been promising for a while to do an episode where we map CLM to DORA. And I think we're ready to do it.
Yeah, it's been a while. We alluded to this when we were talking with Chris McGrath on stage.
Yeah, right.
So DORA and NIS2.
Yeah.
And I'm going to kind of blend these. But Tim, episode 427.
DORA stands for the Digital Operations Resilience Act.
Yes.
It's a European regulation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are in Europe who know about this, you know exactly what you're under. But you may never have thought about Certificate Lifecycle Management as a critical set of controls that help you to check a lot of boxes.
Sure.
Like
This
is something Chris McGrath talked about quite a bit, as being like certificates specifically being like a major credential form factor that is called for. PKI, cryptography, certificate specifically, and therefore certificate lifecycle management are all called for as controls within this. One of the problems, Tim, just like in episode 427, when we mapped Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 NIST to Certificate Lifecycle Management.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think people get tripped up on is the fact that NIST is never going to say, you must get a Sectigo Certificate Lifecycle. They're never going to be that prescriptive.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about Certificate Lifecycle Management.
They're not even going to be prescriptive to the point where they use a category name.
Correct.
But when they talk about what you need to do, that is stuff you do through CLM.
Absolutely, Tim.
Yeah.
And so therefore, we're trying to call out the fact that, hey, did you know that you can directly map a lot of things that are in NIS2 and DORA to Certificate Lifecycle Management as a category?
Yeah.
And so let's talk about NIS2 just for a moment. Some of the critical requirements that are just make it so obvious, Tim. There are 18 critical sectors covered by NIS2.
Okay.
It applies to essential, important entities. We would call that in NIST critical infrastructure and things like that. The Europeans have just slightly different language. Article 21 of NIS2, risk management includes cryptography, asset management, and some of those assets are your credential form factors and your cryptography, incident handling, and disaster recovery, business continuity. So Certificate Lifecycle Management helps with all. Certificate Lifecycle Management, if it does one thing, is it handles uptime. So therefore, it's a major.
It's a huge uptime tool.
So Article 21 in NIS2, right? Certificate Lifecycle Management. How about this, Tim? Another thing it calls for, a critical requirement, not even like a should have. This is like if you don't have it, you don't have NIS2. Mandatory incident reporting and business continuity planning.
Okay. Yes.
Emphasis on supply chain security and secure system acquisition. And so, Tim, if you're buying and selling companies, if you're part of M&A, if you are selling something into a larger organization, all these things apply to you as well. In other words, the underdog thinking of, oh, I don't need to have CLM. I'm too small for it to matter. Well, no, NIS2 says even if you're playing as a supply chain member of this wider thing, all these things apply to you as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And so let's talk about DORA's critical requirements, just using the language that's right within it. So it applies to European Union financial entities, critical ICT providers. Article 6 says that ICT risk management includes strong authentication and key protection.
Okay.
It calls that out specifically.
Those are very explicit. Yeah.
And you know as well as I do, Tim, in the 90s, early 2000s, those things would never have even been, the prescription levels of any guidance would never have covered that.
Of course not.
But now it's written explicitly. And Certificate Lifecycle Management gives you that, right? When they say strong authentication, Tim, that's code word for a certificate.
Right.
Let's admit that.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Right. As we've discussed a lot, right? PKI-based authentication.
Major incident reporting to regulators with tight timeframes. How are you going to do that How are you going to do that without a certificate lifecycle management to be able to tell the regulator what certificate was breached? If you can't manage what you don't know you have, and you can't report on what you don't know you have, right? Tim, DORA, digital resilience testing and robust business continuity management. And so therefore, part of the testing is, once again, you can't manage what you don't know you have. How do you test what you don't know you have?
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
And if part of this emphasis on business continuity is heavy within DORA, isn't it? And I would say that if the whole point of uptime of certificate lifecycle management, uptime and certificate lifecycle management are words that go hand in hand. It's peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah.
Well, how do you talk about business continuity with if you leave out the biggest uptime management system that exists for strong authentication?
Yeah, absolutely.
That to me is the most direct mapping between CLM and DORA. All right, regulatory oversight of critical third-party ICT providers. And so, again, oversight, visibility. It's one of the pillars of certificate lifecycle management, right?
Yeah.
And so those are just the big call outs. Let's actually, Tim, it's been a long time since we've covered this. The 5 pillars of CLM since we were doing the mapping.
Sure.
Discovery, deployment or provisioning, renewals, revocations, replacements, integrations as the 5th pillar.
Yep.
And then, of course, the capstone over all of it,
Visibility. Yeah.
And so all of these things are directly mappable to DORA and NIS2, as they were very directly mappable to Cybersecurity Framework 2.0.
Absolutely, they were. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the pillars themselves. So let's do the mapping from pillar to DORA.
Okay. First pillar's discovery.
Discovery. So NIS2 and DORA both call for they must deliver a complete certificate inventory specifically for NIS2 asset management. That's Article 21.
Okay.
Article 21 of NIS2 literally calls for discovery of certificate inventory.
It uses the phrasing certificate inventory. There you are.
Is there a more, you ever heard of a more explicit mapping?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Right.
For DORA, the ICT asset identification and classification is essentially the same thing without using the word certificate.
Yeah, because they're assets.
Both NIS2 and DORA call for must enable governance of cryptographic usage policies.
So that you need to know what they are.
You can't have governance if you don't have visibility.
Yeah.
If you don't know what you have, you can't do that. All right.
Okay.
Deploy. Provisioning. NIS and DORA, in fact, DORA Article 6, calls specifically for implementing secure configuration and encryption controls.
Secure configuration and encryption controls. Okay. Yeah.
So in other words, since they're calling specifically for encryption controls in configuration, where are you configuring your, especially for private certificate authorities, your bit lengths? Because that's specifically what that's calling for. Right. Well, certificate lifecycle management will typically have that. All right. Remember, deployment or provisioning as a pillar of CLM. NIS2 and DORA call for you must automate issuance for strong authentication, Tim.
Okay. Yes.
This is the
That's
center.
provisioning. That's it. Automate issuance. It's got the word issuance
Automated
in it.
issuance.
Yeah. Yep.
This is the most direct mapping I've ever seen.
Yeah. Straight up. Yep. Absolutely. And in the absence of CLM, your options for doing that are terrible.
In the absence of CLM,
I won't say it's impossible, but you would be doing homegrown programming, your options are terrible.
That is a very good statement to make. If without certificate this is not just a mapping. It's almost like they're basically calling for you to have CLM, and in order to prove to an auditor that you're doing the equivalent, you're recreating CLM from scratch.
Right. Yeah. And how auditable is it if you could just say, look, here's my CLM package. I'm going to take you in. I'm going to give you a little demo, right? I'm going to capture some screen caps and send them over to you.
NIS2 and DORA also call for reduced deployment errors that create vulnerabilities.
Okay. So deployment. So consistency and accuracy of deployment is a huge benefit of CLM, right?
It's one of the pillars of CLM.
Yeah.
The provisioning technologies that I know that our company provides is critical to getting it right.
Yep.
And doing it with best practices.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Tim, let's get on to the next one.
Okay.
The next pillar, renewals.
Renewal. Okay, sure.
Remember, we're mapping the renewal pillar of Certificate Lifecycle Management to DORA and NIS2. Number 1, you must prevent service outages. You must uphold NIS2 continuity, and DORA uses the word availability.
Okay. All three of those words, continuity, availability, service outage. Yes. Yes.
Certificate Lifecycle Management is all about preventing outages.
Yep. Preserve that continuity of those mission critical PKI components without which your systems just fail.
Number 2 for renewal.
Okay.
How on the nose is this one, Tim? Both NIS2 and DORA call for maintains encryption integrity by avoiding expired certificates.
Got expired certificates right there in the wording. I mean, by avoiding expired certificates, that's just explicit.
We're 3 pillars deep. And at this point, every pillar has an explicit call out.
Yep. It sure does.
Not just a vague mapping, an explicit call out of certificate lifecycle management. All right. Let's go on now to revocation, replacements, mapping NIS2 and DORA to revocations and replacements for certificate lifecycle management.
Okay.
You must enable rapid incident containment under NIS2 and DORA. If you can't revoke, you're not doing that.
It's incident containment. That's what it is.
You must support regulatory incident response obligations.
Yes.
You must allow mass replacement after certificate authority compromise or algorithm deprecation.
You always save that one for last, right? You give me these two kind of sort of, slightly abstracted phrases that we know what they really mean.
And then I hammer it home.
You bust out with the very explicit. Read that one more time.
Tim.
Allow.
NIS2 and DORA say that you must allow mass replacements after certificate authority compromise or algorithm deprecation.
I mean, that's just so explicit. Yeah. Okay. There you are.
And final one, integration and workflows. The 5th pillar of CLM.
Yes.
You must feed certificate lifecycle management data to SIMs or ITSM systems for continuous monitoring and audit.
There you go.
It literally calls
certificate
out certificate lifecycle management
and must feed them. And so it's about an integration.
This is a direct.
And then that also touches visibility. I don't know if you prepped this for visibility, but I noticed several visibility things as we walk through those pillars.
Yeah, it's rife throughout.
Yeah.
It is totally. So in other words, the visibility capstone of over the pillars.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, we have an episode, I don't remember the number, but it's worth going back and watching first the original 4 pillars of CLM and then the 5th pillar of CLM, which are 2 episodes we had in the years ago, but they're perennial. They're worth watching. But just as a reminder, our premise is that visibility, which is absolutely essential, it's not a pillar because it is enabled by the pillars and it also is an enabler of the pillars. And so the visual model we had was 5 pillars with a capstone across the top. And what that does is the capstone holds up the pillars and the pillars hold up the capstone, because that's how visibility really works with the pillars in real life. So as a result, visibility, as you're going through every one of these individual pillars, we're seeing visibility come into it.
And it should.
Right.
You would expect it at every pillar.
Yeah.
And you'd almost think they listened to our podcast because they literally... Maybe they did.
Right.
Final one, Tim, just to hammer it. The integration pillar of certificate lifecycle management, called out by NIS2 and DORA, calls for you must embed cryptographic governance across the supply chain.
Across the supply chain. There you are. Right? That's integration.
That's integration.
Okay. Wow. So, I mean, I think that's fascinating because as you and I have looked at guidance of this type over the years, there absolutely has been this thread of, they say there's a requirement and the only way you can achieve that requirement is through predictable, reliable, consistent, accurate certificate management. And then we turn around and say, well, that can't be accomplished without CLM. What is fascinating about this one is how explicit it is, right?
Isn't it?
So like in the world of analogies, I might say, look, you need to get from New York to LA in one day. And we say, well, there's only one way to do that is on an airplane. So the requirement is I have to get from New York to LA in one day. And the answer is I have to take an airplane. But now it's like the new one comes along and it says, you have to fly an airplane from New York to LA. Right? Where they've stopped this exercise of relying on the IT teams to interpret those guidelines and connect the dots, even though there's only one way to connect the dots. And instead, they've started to connect the dots for us. And I think that's a meaningful difference.
I think, Tim, you're dead on.
Right?
This is a big change from earlier governance papers.
Yeah.
And NIS2 and DORA, they have teeth.
Yeah.
And Chris.
Oh, yeah.
Chris told us it's serious business.
It's serious business.
And, you know, I don't live under those guidance programs, the legislation that's being written over in Europe. But my goodness, we have to respect it. And, you know, for those of you who are North American based listeners or anywhere else in the world that's not Europe, this is important to you.
Yeah.
Because this kind of more explicit, you must be using certificate lifecycle management and governance and visibility and renewals and deployments and revocation capabilities, all these things that map directly to certificate lifecycle management. If you're not doing that in a mature way that you could actually call a governance program, you're probably very behind the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think if in Europe, if you're in Europe, this is the law. If you're out of Europe, there's a few things to say about that. One of which is, first of all, are you a multinational? Because even if you physically are not in Europe, that does not mean that you don't have these requirements. So that's point number one. Point number two, I think, is we see, especially these EU level IT regulations can become a model for other regions. And the case study in that is GDPR, right? Where GDPR then got followed, copied, imitated by other regulations in other geographies, right? And then the third thing is what you said, which is why we have all of these regulations is because in the absence of them, bad things happen. So even if you manage, and one of the analogies I've been using lately to talk about this sort of finding a sneaky way to skirt the reg is I say, it's like saying, you know what, putting my kids in car seats is inconvenient for me. And I got to drive down to the store to buy some car seats. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the rules so that car seats are not required. You go, okay, that's fine. You can avoid getting a ticket, but you're not going to avoid something horrible to happening if you get in an accident with your kids in the car, right? That's still there. The fundamental need that created the reg is true regardless of where you live. So even if you feel that you're lucky enough that DORA doesn't apply to you, the reasons DORA exists do apply to you.
Exactly.
Right.
So, Tim, I think we'll end it there, but I don't think you can consider yourself NIS2 or DORA compliant without certificate lifecycle.
I think, 100%.
There it is.
All right. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Tim.